Let's get straight to it now. The Inspector General of Police, Adamu Mohammed, has announced the disbandment of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the Nigeria Police Force. The development comes after days of online and street protests against the brutality and extrajudicial killings of the SARS operatives nationwide. Mr. Adamu said the authorities were listening to the people.
Members of the management team, senior police officers here present, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it is with sense of patriotism and commitment to my professional calling that I invited you to this important press briefing to address critical internal security issues. The current development in which cross-sections of Nigerians are calling for the scrapping of Special Anti-Robbery Squad as a unit in the Nigeria Police has remained under constant monitoring and due assessment by the government. The government acknowledges the inalienable rights of citizens to freedom of association and expression. The current agitation in this context is seen as a manifestation of the natural desires of citizens to participate in matters concerning policing and internal security in the nation. This is indeed one of the fundamental principles of community policing, which we are currently implementing. The Nigeria Police leadership has, since the commencement of the protests, been engaging the leadership of some civil society organizations with a view to initiating meaningful and wide-ranging discussions on the subject of their concerns. Our valued covenant with the citizens of this nation is to serve and protect them and integrate their concerns and views into our practices, especially within the dictates of community policing principles, which constitute a critical component of national policing and internal security strategy of the federal government. Following a review of the current developments, and in due cognizance of the wide and legitimately held concerns of well-meaning citizens on the existence and operations of Special Anti-Robbery Squad, as a responsive and citizen-oriented police force, it is hereby directed as follows. 1. The Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the Nigeria Police, otherwise known as SARS, is hereby dissolved across all formations, the 36 state police commands, and the Federal Capital Territory, where they currently exist. 2. All officers and men currently serving in the unit are to be deployed with immediate effect. 3. New policing arrangements to address the offenses of armed robbery and other violent crimes that fall within the mandate of the dissolved Special Anti-Robbery Squad shall be presented in due course. 4. A Citizens and Strategic Holders Forum will be formed to regularly interface with the leadership of the police at all levels and advise on police activities. 5. To deal with the reports of crimes committed against citizens, an investigation team will be constituted, which will include civil society organizations for transparency, and the culprit will be punished.
Right, let's just go straight to it. We saw what happened over the weekend. It affected us right here at the Arise News Channel. Our own cameraman was hurt in the ad. Your take on this?
Well, that's very nice, flowery rhetoric from the Inspector General of Police. But as you said, our colleague here at Arise News, Ogona Francis, would strongly disagree that the federal government recognizes as an inalienable right the freedom of association. And he wasn't even a protester. He was there to cover the protest. And he was attacked beaten, bloody. He had a rock thrown at him, for crying out loud. Protesters were doused with water cannons and tear gassed. So this is really it's completely unacceptable, quite frankly. And also, yes, it's been seen as a victory that SARS has been disbanded, according to the headlines. But when you read the fine print, what it is that it's been collapsed into those gentlemen that formed SARS are going to go into other police formations, other police squads. So it's just a simple case of moving the bad eggs around instead of ejecting them entirely from the police force, which is what needs to happen. That is addressed to some degree by the Inspector General. He's saying that there will be accountability, there's going to be an investigation. And that's what we need to see happen, because SARS has been disbanded before, has it not? And the crimes continue. I do want to congratulate everybody who participated in the protest in whatever way they, lended their voice. It's obviously moved the needle, but we're not quite there yet. There's a culture of police brutality, which I must repeat, is so disgraceful. Shortly after the Inspector General's statement, we had our own Arise colleague covered in blood. If that's not a physical manifestation of how deep-rooted this problem is, and the men who attacked him are not SARS officers, then the Abuja Police Command. So this is a police brutality problem. Everybody needs to broaden the scope of this beyond SARS. SARS have been accused of all kinds of egregious things, but this is a policing problem, and that needs to be addressed.
Well, first, let's commend the young Nigerians who led this protest, both male and female, influencers, celebrities, young persons in different aspects of life. They spoke with one voice that certain kinds of conduct will be unacceptable going forward in Nigeria, and that change is required in many aspects of our lives. So to that extent, the protest against police brutality became a representative move for the expression, as I said last week, of the anger of the young people against distortions within our society. And in this regard, in this latest protest, I think we should commend all the musicians. Someone like, what's his name, a small doctor, who led a team from the Agege wing. Big crowd, massive crowd, towards Alausa, the state government secretariat. People like Faz, the bad guy, who also led a group from the Lekki end. And they were very effective. And also a young lady called, I think her name is Rino, who was a spokesperson at the Lagos State House of Assembly. He demonstrated a lot of courage. And in Abuja, you had Aisha Yesufu, also becoming the voice of the revolution. And also all the young men like Mike Edwards, who led the protest in London, John Boyega, all those people who spoke up and said police brutality will no longer be condoned in Nigeria. And of course, the whole thing went viral, both on social media and in physical spaces. We saw protests in South Africa. We saw protests even in Liberia. We saw protests in London, everywhere. And it was then important for the Nigerian government to respond, because we saw how it was becoming an embarrassment to the government. It was going to become another George Floyd protest, because even international figures like Cardi B and co. were beginning to join the protests on social media. So what we have seen here is at one level, the power of the youth. Second, protests being focused, being purposeful. Because you see, even the protesters were saying nobody should allow violence and nobody should allow politicians to hijack it. They didn't want a situation where it will become a PDP, APC thing. So I think that also has to be commended. So at the end of the day, the federal government says we've now dissolved SARS. Now, that dissolution, there's also a problem of trust attached to it. Because in 2019, the same Inspector General of Police said he was dissolving. We did not see any difference. And that's why people are saying we need to go a step further. The president himself should address Nigerians to put a stamp on it. He should come up with an executive order. Well, I don't know of what effect that will be.
No.
And there are 5 planks on which the Inspector General's position is based. But I hope later in the program we will have the opportunity to interrogate those points one by one and deconstruct them appropriately.
Great ones there. We'll go for a quick commercial break now. When we come back, we'll have Rotus, we'll have Michael, we'll have the whole team to come talk to us. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Arise News channel. So our dependable Rotus is here to give us Africa business update. Rotus, Mr. Dependable, over to you.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Tundun. Good morning, Doctor. Yeah, so look, I mean, the SARS protests have been dominating news headlines everywhere. We've had extensive coverage here on Arise News. And so on the business side of things, the question has been how much of corporate America, how much of corporate Nigeria have lended their voices to the SARS protests, and how much of a delicate balance do corporations in Nigeria have to, thread the line with respect to whether or not they should support this, because there is risk of a backlash. But we've seen some corporations actually lend their voice to this. We kick off with a tweet from Abubakar Suleiman, who is the CEO of Sterling Bank. He uses a Desmond Tutu tweet talking about if you are neutral in these type of situations, then you are taking on the side of the oppressor. If an elephant's foot is stepping on a mouse, and you don't say anything, then the mouse will not appreciate what you're doing, your neutrality. So you have to take a side. So that's him putting himself out there and his firm. On Instagram, if you look at a number of slides here from Sterling Bank, we kick off with a very interesting use of metaphor here, where they say there's a new virus that is in town. We take a look at the next part here. They say that it's confirmed that masks cannot stop it. Look at the next slide here. They say that social distancing leaves you open to its attack. Take a look at the next slide, and they say the symptoms include cold sweats, shocks, instant headaches, and also death. Another part of their slides here, they say that once you come in contact with it, your account balance suffers badly. Also, they kept going here. This is a post on Instagram. They also said that it has been outlawed 3 times, and then I believe finally here they now put a couple hashtags. Says, how do we flatten the curve, end the madness, and protect their youth? So a very, very clever use of metaphor from Sterling Bank, where they didn't actually mention SARS by name or anything, but by using the COVID-19 as a metaphor, they're using that to represent SARS and say, okay, how do we flatten the curve? These are the symptoms. It's been outlined. So many people applauded them for what they did and putting this message out there. Also, First Bank also had a message out as well. They also lent their voice to this as well, using the hashtag, reform now and end the brutality. Daystar Church, because on Saturday when a number of messages were going out, people said, look, make sure that your pastors and your churches know what's going on. So, you can look at them as a non-profit organization, as a church, but they also lent their voices. That's Daystar Church. Even Wema Bank as well, through their alert. In fact, they actually went out and used the SARS hashtag. So there's their own message. Also, God is Good Motors, the logistics firm, is a TikTok video that's been floating. You can see their logo at the top right of the video. They actually use footage from the SARS protests that have been going on, people who have been complaining. So even then, not just in financial services, not just in the religious centers, also in the logistics and transportation space, God is Good Motors also lending their voice. So what's also been said here is, look, how much of a fine line do they have to walk? If you look at the Black Lives Matter protests and you compare the branding message for Black Lives Matter and compare that to SARS, some would say that corporations in the United States have an easier time backing, you can argue it's on either side or the other, backing Black Lives Matter, because the actual phrase itself, Black Lives Matter, appeals to humanity, appeals to the fact that, black people, their lives have some type of value. So if you're a corporation in the US, it might, there are political connotations to this, of course, but it might be easier for them to hitch their wagons to this. Whereas in Nigeria, the phrase "end SARS" is talking about removing a government establishment completely, possibly ending jobs. It's more aggressive. So there's that discussion that's being held. But again, for God is Good, for Daystar, for Sterling Bank, for First Bank, they've hitched their wagons to this. And generally, the opinion has been a little bit, there's been some voices of dissent here and there, depending on how you feel about this situation. But overwhelmingly, actually they've been positive. So interested to know what you all think about corporations hitching their wagons to this movement. Also, the PwC has a report out, their September report for Nigeria. They are saying here that unemployment is expected to hit 30% based on the effects of COVID-19 on the economy. This is, of course, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the consulting firm. They've got a chart here that looks at unemployment by age group. Just as a reminder to people, though, the 15 to 24-year-old groups, look at that, 40% unemployment. The red bar, of course, is the percentage underemployment, and of course, also the black bar is their proportion to the labor force. You'll also see that the other groups, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, all the age groups there, they've got their representation as far as unemployment is concerned, but the youth. And if you tie this to what's going on with End SARS, I think it was also Mental Health Day or so, 2 or 3 days ago. Yeah. Saturday, thank you, Rufai. So you've got SARS movement that the youth, which are mostly in the fintech space, technology folks that, they've got their dreadlocks, they've got their laptops, they've had to deal with, harassment from SARS. There's a high unemployment rate where the same group that is targeted by, majority targeted by the SARS group, they're also facing a high unemployment. So this is, we're at 23% now for Q2 2020. That's the most recent figure of unemployment from the Bureau of Statistics. But now you've got, they've got PwC saying that this actually could increase. Lastly, we've got unemployment by education levels. Look at the black bar for bachelor degree holders. That's above 40%. Of course, the highest there is below primary school, never attended. That's over 45%. But you've still got a healthy number of educated Nigerians in the country that are facing unemployment. And so this is presently, PwC is saying again, that this could actually rise as we move into the fourth quarter of the year. So there's a number of challenges that are being faced with respect to the effects of COVID-19. Let's not forget the Bureau of Statistics and their COVID-19 socio-economic monthly report, where we saw, as Doctor talked about passionately, folks, borrowing a lot of money, 55% of households borrowing money from friends and family, more than from banks and financial institutions, and also using most of that money for food stuff. So, look, amidst all the other things that Nigeria is going through, with End SARS, dominating the headlines and corporations lending their voices, we've still got our economic challenges that we've got to face in the country.
Constant challenges, but I'm going to disagree with you, Rotus, about Black Lives Matter being an easier proposition. That's also political. Yeah. There are those who claim that the Black Lives Matter movement has been hijacked by Antifa and other left-wing organizations, so they want to give it a wide berth. So they claim that they're not trying to dismiss the validity of the point of Black Lives Matter. But it turns out, in practical terms, they do. You'll recall the infamous quote, Michael Jordan, the basketball superstar, but also a black man, rather shamefully refused to come down on political issues, saying Republicans buy sneakers too. That was awful that he said that. People do think about their bottom line. If you tout Black Lives Matter, it might put off, certain demographics and it will affect your sales. But I'm really pleased that you highlighted this story. And I want to really congratulate the organizations that you mentioned, the banks and GIG that you mentioned. Corporate social responsibility goes beyond planting flowers and making donations. You have to stand up and be counted.
Very well said, Tundun.
Good point.
Let me just make another very strong point. I'm happy they have taken a stance. This happened in America. When Black Lives Matter happened, it was Nike that first took a stance that made Kaepernick an ambassador. A lot of people came out in protest against Nike thinking, their market was going to fall. People were burning Nike sneakers. They were tearing it up and things like that. Guess what? Nike's earnings also increased after that time. Yes. It never dropped. So companies take a stand about this, and corporate Nigeria taking a stand about this. It's really very important. But not just taking a stand. We should all be part of the solution. They employ most of these police officers and security guards. The question is, do they give enough training when they are supposed to train them, in partnership with police officers and other the police rank and file? So they too should do a little bit more, as regards this. And we should all come together because it concerns all of us. And the funny thing is, somebody was saying the other day that, It's not now even if your parents are rich or wealthy. I mean, a former minister's son was harassed in this country. So anybody can be killed by these police officers. If it's trigger happy and they catch you in a bad corner, goodness me, we don't pray for it, but we see the outcome.
Well, I think the point about corporate Nigeria should be stretched further. And it's as follows. We've had in the past, companies in Nigeria donating vehicles, police stations to the Nigeria police. But now we are having companies speaking up and saying that, look, brutality is unacceptable. Injustice is unacceptable. Now, ordinarily, most investors in Nigeria, most members of corporate Nigeria, they try to play safe. They tend to be pro-establishment because, one of the most difficult things doing business in Nigeria is about the difficult regulatory framework and how regulators can easily come after you if you are seen or tagged to be anti-government, which is why I think it takes a lot of courage for the MD of Sterling Bank, for Wema Bank, for GIG Motors, led by Chidi Ajero, to come forward and say, look, we are also in this together. And what this draws attention to is that we are all citizens at the end of the day, whether you are running a business or you are running a church. Take Pastor Sam Adeyemi. He's been very vocal on Twitter. That's the head pastor of a Daystar, which you refer to. And it will reassure their customers or the members of the churches that at the end of the day, there is a sense of community that is shared by people who do business, by pastors who provide leadership from the pulpit. And the more important part of it is that government should note this very carefully. There's a lot of skepticism out there that what is going on is just an attempt to just calm down people's nerves and then move on. And that's why this morning in Lagos, you still see that people are still out there on the streets. And I doubt if those protests will stop until at least people are concretely assured that government means business this time, that NSAS would be a reality. And some people are even asking those policemen, rather than absorb them into other units of the police where they can even pollute the system further, maybe they should be sent to Sambisa Forest to go and face Boko Haram. Yes. Since they say they are so courageous and they know how to shoot, let them go and engage Boko Haram, where they can be even more useful to the community. Yeah. But in any case, that's an expression of how deeply concerned the people of Nigeria are. And when they say they are relocating, they are going to create another unit to address armed robbery and other crimes. I ask a question, and we would like to ask the Inspector General of Police, where is the mobile police? Right. The mobile police used to be a very strategic unit, but all of a sudden, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad overshadowed and overtook the mobile police. Even in its worst days, the mobile police was not as notorious or as bad as well,
they
are probably busy
picking up children from school and going
carrying madam's bags.
Some are washing in the supermarkets. That's where the mobile police
Some are washing plates. It's very shocking.
It's so sad.
A police force that is reduced to carrying bags for the wives of important persons. That's quite a police, a very strange contraption.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We move on to business updates. Some are watching, please, Dr. Abati. Michael Wilson joining us now from London.
I'm glad you think I'm that funny. Thank you. Bank of China.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, good morning. Took steps over the weekend. They've been worried about the strength of the renminbi or the yuan, depending on what you want to call it. So they've removed financial firms' requirements to hold a 20% reserve, and that's actually caused it to decline slightly. Mainland stocks did actually quite well on the fact that the yuan actually went down a bit. That policy has actually been welcomed, quite honestly. But Hong Kong did slightly coattail the rally, so most looking relatively good at the beginning of this week as far as Asia. But given the propensity of the US president to tweet a lot, they call it tweet risk now, Asia Pacific's markets are mostly stagnant this morning. The exception is Japan, where a strengthening yen, poor new machinery orders, and North Korea's unveiling of new weaponry have pushed the Nikkei about 0.5% lower. So let's recap what happened last week, and it was quite an interesting one, really. There's a sort of rotation, really, of the financial markets between risk-seeking and risk-off, a third positional change in the White House as far as the stimulus plan is concerned. I have to say I'm finding it very difficult to keep track of all this, but if you remember, there was the difference between a 2.2 trillion package and the Democrats rejecting a $1.8 trillion package, and the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin appears to be sticking to the 2.2 trillion demand, etc., etc. So even if the White House actually capitulates, markets now totally ignoring the possibility of fiscal stimulus package not happening. In other words, I think it will. If it doesn't, then I think we're in for a bit of a bloody week, but we'll see how we go. EU regulators this side of the pond are drawing up a list of up to 20 tech companies like Facebook and Apple, stringent rules, they say, to control market power, transparency, and calling upon them to share data. I would say, as we say these days, good luck with that. UK Prime Minister likely to announce a raft of new COVID-19 restrictions. There's going to be a tiering system of various districts in the country. Too really complicated to talk about. We'll hear the results. There's a great deal of frustration here, particularly amongst pubs and restaurants, that they don't really know where they stand with all this, and they're waiting to see whether they're actually going to survive this autumn and winter. And a weekend of intense diplomacy as far as the EU and the UK is concerned. Brexit trade negotiations, self-imposed deadline, as you know, on the 15th of October for that to finish. That's coming up fairly soon. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson told Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron that the EU will have to back down from its hardline position on fisheries and the rest of it. Well, that's not going to happen. So I think that sterling probably will have a fairly tough week on the back of that. And staying with the UK, some concerns for the health of the UK economy. I've got plenty of them. I'm sure lots of people have. GDP only grew last week, it was told, by 2.1%. And that eat out to help out thing did not work. Additional to that, now we've got a couple of surveys saying that while the UK economy may have grown 17% over the last 3 months, it may actually be slowing down. Growth for the final 3 months, maybe 1% or less. In reality, now the Bank of England, here's an interesting one. Now, take what you feel about this. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm only taking a view from what I've been hearing from financial commentators this morning. But the Bank of England has actually written to commercial banks and retail banks, i.e. what we call high street banks, asking them whether they would be prepared for negative interest rates, which is very interesting, actually. So this kind of inching forward, again, no definite news on that, but you never know. I think it's unlikely somehow. It sends out all the wrong signals, but again, who knows? British Airways chairman Alex Cruz has stepped down as the airline's chief executive, facing, as they put it, and the Aer Lingus boss is going to come in. We're navigating the worst crisis faced in our industry, and I'm confident these internal promotions will ensure IAG, that's the owner of British Airways, is well placed to emerge in a strong position. I'll just run through commodities for you because we've got a busy week coming up. Gold, assisted by the slide in the US dollar, should remain above the 1900 $100 an ounce mark. That's what the markets are saying. Oil finished lower on Friday. Supply concerns hitting the energy market. Again, I think that the majority pushing it's going to be A, the Gulf storms, and B, the strikes in the Norwegian oil industry. And natural gas production falling 60% in Norway. But the strike has been called off, but it'll take them a little while to get back in again. OK, the week ahead. Here's a busy one then for you. First of all, Q3 banking season begins. Likes of JP Morgan, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley. As you know, the banking sector has been very much hit by what's been going on in the pandemic. The banks had set aside $25 billion. Now it's $34 billion to help to help them with regards to their credit losses. On Tuesday, I'm not doing advertising for the company, but Apple is holding a launch event. People are getting very excited about this because it will reveal the iPhone lineup. This apparently, if you like these kind of things, means, you know, Apple obviously needing to release a new product every so often. Will it be a significant one? The experts are saying it will. And I think the big one this week really will be the China trade trade data that's coming out tomorrow. Again, what's internal demand? That's the key thing about China, not so much its exports. We know about the exports because it was high into PPE goods, and that obviously during the pandemic it was quite successful. And finally, we get the UK unemployment rate. The figures coming out for August, claimant counts, unemployment rate August, claimant counts September, average earnings August. The UK unemployment rate now 4.1%. That's up from 3.9%. That's relatively high. And of course, that furlough scheme actually is thinning off. The reading won't tell us a whole lot about what's been going on, but I think it probably will be fairly depressing news, for which I apologise in advance. That's the global lineup at the beginning of the week.
Okay, two questions. You mentioned the Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs has been quoted as saying that the US dollar may tumble to its lows of 2018 with the rising likelihood of Joe Biden winning the presidential election or the chance of getting a vaccine before December. How? I don't seem to understand it. Maybe you help explain that connection. And then two, the Brexit clock is ticking. Over the weekend, we saw a lot of intense diplomacy. Would there ever be any consensus before October 15, particularly on the question of fisheries? And if not, how much chaos would that cause in a post-Brexit context?
I think you're right. Let's talk about Brexit first of all. Then, yes, I think there will be a difficulty as far as fishing is concerned. But we have apparently reached an agreement with Norway. Now, I know this is not part of the Brexit discussions, but Norway has for many years had a problem with, and we've had a problem with Norway and Iceland as well. Both those countries coming into our waters and breaking the 12-mile limit and all the rest of it that there is around the waters at the moment. I suspect that accommodation will actually be reached. I would say that agriculture and fisheries is a big thing for the EU, particularly the littoral countries that are actually, on the edges of seas. And I think that some sort of accommodation will be reached. I still feel, and I could be well proved wrong by the 15th about this, I hope not, but I still feel as though what we're seeing is a lot of, final negotiation right up to the wire. That's the way these this is the way trade negotiations actually take place, and I suspect a lot of that's going on right now. As far as Joe Biden's concerned, it's difficult to say. I'm not quite sure Goldman Sachs gets this kind of thing from, but they have presumably much bigger brains than I do, or else I'd be doing their job and they would not be doing mine, if you see what I mean. But I don't think it's going to be bad for the economy. I suspect that what will happen is that countries importing into the United States will probably pay more to do that. But as far as internally is concerned, I think if he gets the infrastructure program going, which we imagine, has been very, very light on detail, but I would imagine he has, I would have thought it would be fairly good for the US economy, which would therefore mean a stronger dollar, quite honestly, because people would look at it and think, yeah, we actually quite like this. But who's to know? These things are very, very early days. I've been reading a lot over the weekend and hearing a lot of comments about what's going on in the US elections. I don't see how you can actually call it right now. Given the fact that it's as crazy as this. It's Columbus Day today, isn't it? The United States. They're thinking of calling it Indigenous Peoples Day today. That's where we are with our discussions. There's lots of things going on that we have no conception about, and they're all challenging the old order. That's a good thing in lots of ways. But I think Biden will probably be quite optimistic for the US economy if he gets in.
I just wanted to make a quick comment about British Airways. The airline has taken a beating. Let's not forget that last year they had a computer glitch issue that had a setback, that gave them a setback as regards flights and the likes. And now, because of coronavirus, is it the end of big planes? Because a lot of those big planes cannot actually bring in the money for them any longer because of petrol and the cost of aviation fuel and the likes. So, very terrible times. But Michael, I wanted you to talk about, but I had to let you go. Thank you so much for your time.